I am so excited to share my latest resource, downloadable print your own flashcard decks. These have been created following my many years working with children of all abilities in the clinical setting, and my themed flashcard decks work. The kids love them because they're engaging and they encourage movement, learning, coping skills, and just plain fun. From dinosaurs to Halloween, each deck includes suggested and themed centering techniques, warm-ups, guided meditation, relaxation, yoga-based movement, and games. Each card in the deck includes multiple yoga-based practices to choose from, meaning you can enjoy a different experience each time you play, and there will always be something that's suitable and accessible for the child you are working with or the setting you are working in. These are highly adaptable tools, and they work in the classroom, hospital, office, or home setting. Download and print on card or paper stock of your choice and enjoy creative, adaptable, and accessible adventures for many years to come with children of all abilities and in all settings. I promise you will not regret adding a set of 2 of these to your resource collection. And keep checking in. I have created a lot of these decks over the many years I worked in the clinical setting with children of all abilities, and I'm slowly updating and releasing them to the public so that all children can benefit from these wonderful tools.
Hello, I'm Lisa Roberts from Yo-Yo Yoga School, and welcome to Movement, Meditation, and Mindfulness, a training program for pediatric professionals, educators, and parents. Today's session is session number 9, and it is essential elements, and today we'll be covering sequencing. So why should we consider sequencing when we're planning movement, meditation, and mindfulness sessions for children? Proper sequencing can help us keep children safe just by introducing movement at the right time. For example, following warming up can keep children safe as you go into those deeper, more full body stretches. You've got to warm the body up. We're teaching children to have control of their bodies through mindfulness and mindful practices. So this also helps to keep them safe. By having a solid introduction and setting up the expectations and safety precautions for class and letting kids know what to expect and what behaviors are expected, how to keep each other safe. And we'll be covering all this through this webinar. These are all the aspects that are important elements of sequencing. It helps you to have an engaging class. If it's not overly segmented and choppy, if you have a well-planned, well-sequenced class, children will stay engaged. Also, we want to benefit kids. We want to teach them mindfulness skills. We want to teach them breathing skills. We want to teach them how to move their bodies with control and safety. We want it to be developmentally appropriate. So all of these things come into play. All of these elements are a part of planning and sequencing beneficial sessions that are safe and engaging, and very importantly, fun for kids. So let's go through our sequencing checklist. We typically, in a movement meditation mindfulness session, will include an introduction. There will be a component of mindfulness to center and ground children before we begin our movement, meditation, and mindfulness session. There will be the warm-up portion for movement, and then our movement adventure where we explore some of the yoga postures and practices and deep stretches that we explored in earlier in this webinar series. It's the fundamentals of yoga-based movement 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do, because having a basic understanding of yoga-based stretches can really help you to plan very beneficial movement, meditation, and mindfulness sessions for children. We also incorporate some meditation or some relaxation. So it can be guided meditation, anything that's really that quiet reflection time. We begin introducing that to children too. We want to include some games and activities, and then of course a closing as well. So all of these elements will come into your sequencing. And we'll break it down. So what is the introduction? This is where we set up our class expectations for the class, set any boundaries. We will discuss a little more about clearly communicating, connecting with your students and class management in a future webinar. But just to touch on it a little, we really want to set up so it's safe and fun for children. Children don't always know what to expect or how to behave, but if you set the tone from the beginning, then that will stop you from having to disrupt your flow. And this is really, this applies a lot for more if you're teaching groups, small groups or larger groups. Of course, the sequencing and planning is important for one-on-one as well, but the class management portion is comes into play a lot more when we're talking about groups. So I often will introduce the class to younger children, especially say, hey, we're going to do some movements, some meditation and mindfulness today. We're going to play, we're going to move, we're going to move our bodies, we're going to breathe, and we're going to have fun. And then I'll set up my expectations and ground rules. And that may be we're going to stay on our yoga mat, and we may trace out the space of our yoga mat and say, that's your space, we're going to stay on it, that's going to keep you safe. And we're going to stay on our mats through the whole practice unless I ask you to come off. And usually that will be because the child is going to demonstrate something, or we're all playing a game and we're getting off the mats and moving to a different part of the area to play the game. And the theme, what to expect. So we are going to use an example. I'm going to take you through an example lesson plan today in this webinar. So I'll use that as an example now. So today we're exploring the heart, and we're going to explore all of the amazing things that the heart does. And we're going to be moving our bodies, we're going to be playing some games, and we're going to be having fun. So that'll be a nice little introduction where it's playful, it's fun, it's light, but you're really letting them know what to expect. And it's abroad too, and that's important as well. You don't want to be saying, oh, everyone's going to do a back bend today, because not everyone may be able to access that. So it's just, hey, we're going to explore, we're going to play around, we're going to explore our bodies, how they move, how we can breathe, and we're going to have fun. And that's just a nice way to introduce what you're doing, but without any pressure on kids to perform. However, in terms of behavior, this introduction part is a good part to clarify your expectations. Usually in this part, especially if I'm working with teens, I like to give the option to opt out. It's like, hey, if something I'm offering doesn't feel right and you don't feel like doing it, you can just sit quietly on your mat, do some breathing, and that's okay. I'll often, even any age kids, maybe I don't feel like doing this, I always give them that permission. It's like, it's okay, you can just relax on your mat and watch us. And if at any point you feel like joining in, you're welcome to. This way we have that communication at the beginning of class, and that child is less likely to be disruptive during the class or distracting me or the other students. But we'll talk more about that in class management. But just to give those permissions at the start introduction. When we covered mindful breathing, we talked about giving permission for children to rest or use the bathroom or use tissues if they need to. So this introduction is when you set up all of those, I hate to use the word rules, but rules for your class and expectations. And that way they're all out there, it's clearly communicated, and then you can just move forward with limited distractions or disruptions. Okay, so then after introduction, we have mindfulness activities. So lots of different mindfulness activities. It's great if they tie into your theme, and you'll see when I take you through this class plan how I do this for the heart thing, and I do everything that I use. Just some examples would be sunshine, a nice mindful movement, connecting the breath to simple movements. That's a nice starting centering technique. And what the mindfulness activity at the start of class does is really help to ground and center children and prepare them for their movement meditation and mindfulness adventure. Helps them to let go of their day and just bring them into the present moment. That's the idea behind it. So sunshine breath, bear breath, balloon breath, using a chime or a singing bowl or a mantra together. Any of those activities we've explored in the previous webinars. The first 4 cover mindfulness and meditation for kids. If you didn't see those, I recommend going back to the on-demand channel and taking a look at those webinars. If you are looking for more ideas for mindfulness activities that you can incorporate in your sessions, Teach Your Child Meditation, it's by me, Lisa Roberts, and you can find that at Amazon, on my website, and any major bookstore you should be able to find this, and if they don't have it in stock, they would be able to order it in for you. So that's just a helpful tool. It has 70 techniques in it that are great for all ages, from younger children to older children. There's something for everyone, and you'll get lots of little ideas out of here that you can use in your movement meditation mindfulness sessions to introduce that segment of your sequencing. So warming up is next, and we covered that last week. Essential elements number 1 was warming up. Again, if you didn't catch that webinar, highly recommend you go back and take a look at it. So warming up, something you can use the songs that I suggested, which are Dance for the Sun by Kira Wiley, Sun Dance by Karma Kids Yoga. That's a great little one where it's a traditional, in yoga, it's traditionally called a sun salutation, and these 2 songs are a fun, playful way to follow along and do a sun salutation. My book, The Mountain That Longed to Be Different, is also a helpful little story. So this way you can thread a story through and encourage children to do a traditional sun salutation. So that's the little sequence there. It's in the back of the book, but the whole story will link to each of those movements. So that's a fun way to thread story and song into your warm-up sequence, and that way kids are engaged, they're following this story, they're not even thinking about the fact that they're moving their bodies in a mindful way and exercising really and strengthening their bodies and becoming more flexible and warming up their bodies. It's just play for children. Not that we're being tricky and tricking them into doing anything, but it's just so much more fun for children that way, and it makes it something that they want to do and they want to practice. It's not that we're disguising it necessarily, because you'll see as I go through this sequencing, we do talk to children and encourage them to reflect at the end of the practice. How do you feel? How do you feel when you move that body that way? So we really do help children make that connection that, hey, I am moving my body and it does feel good, and I am breathing this way and it does feel good, and I do have control. So it's not like we're disguising it to hide it from children. We're disguising it to make it, or I should rather say disguise, I should say dressing it up to make it fun and engaging and playful, so they want to do it again and again and again. But at the same time, we're teaching children and providing them with the tools that, hey, this is what I can do to make myself feel really, really good anytime I need it. So next, after warming up, we have our movement adventure, and this is where we incorporate a lot of the yoga-based movement and movement flows and yoga-based stretches and postures. So we want to include a nice cross-section of beneficial body movements, and these can include seated, standing, prone, supine postures and stretches. We want to incorporate a nice balance of hip strengtheners, core stabilizers, twists, back bends, stretching and expanding the front side of the body, and forward bends, stretching and expanding the back side of the body, and of course some challenging inversions and balance postures. So you want to include a nice cross section in your movement adventure so the whole body benefits. If you are stuck on postures or you don't have a yoga background, I highly recommend you go back in my webinar series and take a look at the fundamentals of yoga-based movement 1, 2, and 3. And we cover hip, core and twists, forward bends and back bends, inversions, and balancing postures. And you'll get a nice basic understanding. There's video demonstrations and discussions on some of the foundational poses that fall under all of those categories. Of course, if you want a good reference, and these books that I've written them for a reason, because they're very thorough. They're based on my work working with children of all abilities, and they provide a nice foundational tool for somebody regardless of yoga experience. All of my books are great for teachers, pediatric professionals, educators, but they're also helpful for children. Children can pick these up and follow along just as easily as an adult can, regardless of yoga experience. So this is why I recommend them. So if you wanted to go a little bit more into yoga postures, Teach Your Child Yoga, again, just like the other two books, Amazon, my website, yoyoyogaschool.com, or any major bookseller does have, will have this for you. And if they don't have it, they can order it in. Highly recommend this. It has 50 yoga poses and it actually has some sequences in here. So if you're stuck, even after really exploring sequencing with me today, this can be a helpful tool for you just to review that and say, oh yes, I see how she sequenced this class or this session. And you can start to incorporate that into your own planning as well. So we'll move on. Meditation. So we've done our introduction, we've had a little mindfulness centering technique, we've done our movement warm-up, and now we've done our movement adventure. So now we're going to bring it down and introduce that quiet reflection time or relaxation or guided meditation as well. So if you've got a mixed group, the average time I would allow for quiet reflection time or meditation would be 2 to 5 minutes. The ability to relax and quietly reflect that is developmentally appropriate by age is approximately 3 to 4-year-olds, it's about 1 minute. 5 to 8-year-olds, we're looking at 2 to 5 minutes. 9 to 12 plus, we're looking at 10 to 15 minutes that they're developmentally able to. 13 plus, 30 minutes. And as we're getting into the older kids with all of those changes, the physical changes in the body, the hormonal change fluctuations, the increased learning at school and the increased challenge of learning at school, they need these breaks. This is really super beneficial for them. And everything we've just done previously, the mindfulness, the moving the body, prepares the body to relax even deeper. So this is a really important component and it should not be skipped. If you've ever taken a yoga class, you've probably heard a yoga teacher say, don't leave without doing Shavasana. Even if you have to leave the class early, they recommend that you stop and just lay on your mat for a minute or two before you get up and leave the class. Because that's really where you absorb the benefits. It's like you've ironed all the kinks out and you're just going to lay back and relax. And that's where your body gets that deep relaxation and healing. It's a very important part of practice. And for children, it's really important to teach children to take this time to reflect inwardly, to let everything around them just go, and to reward their body with a break and their minds too. So when I say, again, especially with the younger children, about you don't expect kids to necessarily be able to be quiet and still for 1 minute or 2 to 5 minutes. Sometimes it's with guidance and help. Sometimes it may be with a guided story or some guided imagery. We are going to cover what's called yoga nidra or yoga sleep. So we're going to have a whole webinar on relaxation and creating guided meditation, or what's traditionally called yoga nidra experiences for children in a future webinar. So stay tuned for that. They're coming up in the future. I have not posted the upcoming curriculum yet, but it will be posted soon. So August through December, we'll be having a lot more sessions, and the yoga nidra will be coming. However, in the meantime, again, if you want to refer to this book or to my website, there's a lot of MP3 files you can download from 3 albums I published: Breathe, Chill, and Chill 2. And these have guided breathing techniques and guided relaxation techniques for children that can be very, very helpful. Or again, you can just do some of your own storytelling, or even just encouraging children to try and relax and be quiet. You can just play some gentle music. So there's lots of different ways to meditate. It doesn't have to be sitting in lotus umming. It's really more about, this meditation portion is more about reflecting inward and relaxing as much as possible after the movement adventure. So games and activities. This is a very important part of movement meditation and mindfulness sessions for children. It's very important. Games are important for social development in children. But in the ones that we're going to, and again, this is a future webinar, we haven't covered games yet, but games, introducing games and activities into the session really can help children develop physically. It can promote cognitive and sensory development as well. And of course, when we're interacting with other children, learning to take turns, learning to share, it all leads into social development as well. Plus the interaction you get during games, again, social development. So this is a very important part to create a nice holistic movement meditation mindfulness session for children that's truly supportive of all aspects of their development. So games and activities can include the games, like I've just mentioned, arts and crafts, journaling. Encourage children to journal about their experience or draw about their experience. And it may just be, what was your favorite part of this session? Just again, encouraging kids to reflect and express whatever comes up for them during their movement meditation and mindfulness session. And then you could also do storytelling, where everyone takes a turn to build on the yoga adventure and creating a story, or you could tell a story that ties in. Maybe that's part of your relaxation as well. So you see, even though I'm showing how we sequence and what sections there are, some of them can really flow into one another and lend from each other. You're going to see as we go through this webinar today, there are games that you can use as a warm-up instead of a sun salutation. So we can incorporate it multiple times throughout, but you want to weave all of these qualities into the session when you are able to. And then of course the closing. So a definitive end to the session. That's a discussion. Again, it can be something as simple as, what was your favorite part today? What did you like best? And to be fair, when you're in a group setting, to maybe have a talking stick, or maybe we pass a bean bag, or somebody rings the chime. The kids love the chime. So maybe someone rings the chime, and that means it's their talking time, and they share what they liked best about the session, and then they pass the chime to the next child and they take their turn. It could be a breathing technique to close. I've sat children in a circle and we've made a human mandala shape and done a little breathing technique where we take the arms up and down, or come into a forward fold together to make a flower opening and closing. It may be something like that to close. It can be a simple thank you. So really up to you, but just do something just to close the practice together, to acknowledge each other that you practice together, and definitely giving children a chance to share any experiences if they wish to about their session. And that helps you with your future planning, if this is a child that you're working with, and again, or if it's a group of children that you'll be working with again, just to have that feedback of what they like, what they don't like, what they want more of. You can really continue to build on these sessions and make them fun and engaging for these kids. Okay, so a sample lesson plan. an introduction. So this is a sample lesson plan. Those who are joining me live today, I will be sharing this lesson plan with you. If you're on demand, you're welcome just to visit my blog on yoyoyogaschool.com, and you'll see in the archives there are lots of lesson plans. You can take a look through those as well if you need any guidance or just to reiterate what we've shown today in today's webinar. So movement, meditation, and mindfulness, a heart theme. The introduction is talking about the heart. So we have a little discussion about the heart. Do you know how big it is? Do you know where your heart is? Do you know what it does? And then we connect, making little drumming sounds like a heart beating, pitter-pat. And if everyone's doing it, you get this nice little rhythm where the group, or even one-on-one as a teacher with one child, you're connecting via sound. So you're starting to connect to the person you're working with through sound. And then we even include here balloon breath in a heart shape. So we're starting to, even in our introduction, we're bringing a mindfulness, a mindful movement breathing technique into the introduction. And then we move on to mindfulness. So the mindfulness component, we're making a heart and we're taking a breath in. And as we're sharing it with our family, we continue to do this through sharing our love and everything in our heart, filling our heart with love. And as we breathe out, we're sharing it with our family, with our friends, with our pets, with all the people around the world, with all the animals around the world. And we begin to talk about the qualities of the heart: compassion, love, empathy. And through this discussion, you see how this just flows like a very natural conversation. But you see, as we're doing this and we're having these conversations, I'm segueing into our movement section. So from mindfulness, we're moving on to movement. And this particular plan, I've planned it so we're saying, how can we make our hearts bigger to fit all of these qualities in, all these wonderful qualities? Well, we're going to move and stretch our bodies so we can fill ourselves up. So we're going to move and stretch our bodies and create more space in our bodies so we can really fill up with all this love and have more love to share. So this is how we move into it. And then we have a sample warm-up here. Here we have the basics sun salutation. This is based on a traditional sun salutation, I should say. It's based on a traditional basic sun salutation. So I call it warm-up flow in movement, meditation, and mindfulness. This is the one on the screen, is the one from this book. So that's a warm-up flow. You could do some rounds of sunshine breath. You could do cat-cow. We could do cat-cow to down dog. We explored lots of different ways to warm up last week in Essential Elements Part 1, warming up. So if you haven't seen that, again, recommend you go back and take a look at it. All of these webinars build on each other. So the knowledge is really important, and it's planned out in a way that they build on each other. It doesn't matter if you don't do them in order, but I do recommend going back and taking a look at some of the ones that, if you haven't seen them all, just to get a nice, full-rounded, holistic training and understanding of the foundations of movement, meditation, and mindfulness. So sunshine breath, cat-cow, down dog, warm-up flow, all wonderful ways to warm up. And then we have our movement adventure. So you'll notice as we go through some of these sample yoga-based stretches and postures, we've got standing, prone, and supine here. They're all focused on really expanding the chest and heart. Yes, the other parts of the body are incorporated. It's a nice, fully balanced, well-rounded stretch for the whole body. But the focus is a lot on the heart. Even Warrior One, we're coming into cactus arms and creating space here. Humble Warriors, where we have our arms back and lean forward, really with that nice chest expanding. So we're really focusing on the heart area and bringing attention to filling it with love. So you'll see the little heart shape on the screen. I have cues. So none of these postures, they're all just got their regular name, but so we're not theming the postures in this instance to the movement adventure or to the theme. but the cues are. So while we're doing our warrior one with a cactus, I'm just like, feel your big heart, feel your big giant heart, feel how much love it's filled with. If you're doing humble warrior, as you bow forward, imagine sharing your love. So it's all of these like really, really positive cues as we're holding the postures that tie into the theme in this instance, in this particular lesson plan. We're growing, instead of just a tree in a tree pose, we're growing a tree of love. So these are ways you can tie into the theme. The actual postures don't. It's fun to rename the postures, and I highly recommend doing that. And you'll see, if you are familiar with any of my work, if you in the books or from my website, or if you've ever seen me teaching a class, there's lots of different ways. There's not just one way to name a yoga posture. You can name it anything, and kids have great imaginations, and the more creative you are, the more fun your classes will be. But just in this particular example, I haven't renamed them. They're in their traditional names in English, not Sanskrit. And what we're doing here is relating it to the theme through the cues. And that's really helping kids to bring their attention to their heart and filling it with love and the qualities of the heart, as much as the physical aspect too. And you can definitely tie the physical aspect in, as we did in the introduction to class, what the heart is doing, pumping blood, and maybe as you're reaching up, you can say, imagine your heart sending all that blood to your fingertips. So you could do it from the physical perspective as much as you can do with the qualities of the heart as well. So it's really up to you. There's never really an exact right or wrong. It's just what works for you and your teaching style and the children that you're teaching. So meditation. So we've done our movement warm-up and adventure, and now we're ready to start quietening it down. So a lovely little one is the heart meditation, where we close our eyes and we feel our heart, and maybe after moving, our heart rates up a little bit. So maybe we're really feeling the heart beating. And then perhaps we start to encourage children to feel their heart's energy. And because if the heart beats over 100,000 times a day, and if you did this with your hand over 100,000 times, your hand will start to get pretty warm. So that's the same here. The heart is beating, so it's going to create some energy. It's going to create some heat and warmth. So once we bring our hands here, really disconnect and turn our attention inwards, close your eyes and just see if you can feel it now. You may feel your heart beating, but if you really let your attention settle right where your hands are, you're going to begin to feel your heart's energy. And then once you feel that, you can start sending that energy from beneath your hands all the way to the top of your head, all the way down your arms to your fingertips. You can send that energy from beneath your hands all the way to the tops of your shoulders and down to your hips, filling up your torso, not just beneath the hands, but the whole torso. And then perhaps you can send that energy that you feel beneath your hands all the way down to your toes. And now, focusing on that energy, feel it radiate out through the whole body, all the way to the toes, the top of the head, the fingertips. All of your beautiful, unique heart's energy just shining through your body from beneath your hands. Feel it expand and fill your whole body. So that was a little. So that's our meditation, and then sing. And we can talk how you can kind of tear up those rules and flip it around a little as you need to, and when those situations arise. And I'll give some examples of when you need to switch things up. But Love It or Leave It is a game where I play with kids, where we talk about, things that they love or leave. And it's very personal. Something I love, you may be like, oh, grossed out by. Maybe I love snakes, and you're like, oh. So we will, but it's a great way to get kids moving too. And so we will, I would tell children in my group, if this was a group class, hey, we're going to play this game, love it or leave it. I'm going to call out the names of things. If you love it, you're going to just stand up on your toes and reach up for the ceiling and with your arms out in a giant hug, just reaching for it because you love it so much. If you would rather leave it, it's like, oh, not for me. You go down onto your mat and curl into child's pose into a small little ball and hide away from it. So, and then we do this, and I'll call out things like rat, ice cream, kittens, broccoli. I have a whole list, and kids, and it's amazing. Some kids will jump up for broccoli, which is great. And some are like, oh, we're going to hide. So, and this is a nice movement game too. It's also good if kids get really, really relaxed and tired after the meditation. If they then have to go back to class, this is a nice fun game to just review the qualities of the heart. The heart can be things that you love. And when you notice I don't say hate, it's not love or hate. It's I love it or I just rather leave it. It's not for me. Which I think is a much more positive spin. Web of Love is another game I play with kids. And we're going to explore games again in a future webinar, but I just wanted, because we mentioned these in this lesson plan. So you see I have more than one game, and that's important too. Sometimes it's best to have multiple activities. Well, actually, I shouldn't say sometimes. It's always good to have multiple activities up your sleeve, because you never know, maybe the room's not set up for a certain game, or maybe the energy of the kids, you're like, this is the one we need to do today. Or maybe you have extra time and, or the kids are having a great time in games, and you've got some extra time, so maybe you'll do more than one activity. So it's always good to have multiple activities up your sleeve. Web of Love, so we're using a ball of string, and person one will wrap a little piece around very loosely, don't get tight, and then I'll take the ball and I'll roll it to person B, and that's whoever I choose, and with it I send a compliment. And then person B will roll the next piece around their fingers loosely, hold on to it, and then they'll roll it to the next person, and so on and so on. You want to encourage it so at least children in a group at least get one compliment. If you have time for 2 or 3, it's even better. And this way you start to form a web between the children sitting in a circle, and they see how connected they are. And I think it's just a nice way for children to start to compliment each other, to see one another. And sometimes for children, it's helpful for them to see how others view them, because sometimes it's not what they're thinking. They may come to realize that they are loved a lot more than they perceive. So that's a nice little game for, again, reaffirming the qualities of the heart, but also a nice little visual game for children, just to realize their sense of community and their connection with the kids around them. And then back-to-back breathing, that's a nice one. We partner up and we see if we can take some nice, slow, full breaths, and we become aware of the back side of the body as we breathe. Like, can you feel your partner breathing? Can you connect your breath with your partner's breath? And in this one, maybe it's like, if you sit really still, can you feel your partner's heart beating through the back? Typically we can't, but it's just a nice way to slow things down, start connecting with their partner, being aware of their own bodies, but also being aware of somebody else's. And again, bringing the attention to the back side, feeling it present to someone else's back, especially as we breathe, really encourages those deeper, fuller breaths. So that's some example games and activities that tie in to a heart theme. And then closing, very important. So I've got some example prompts for discussion for closing in this particular example. Obviously, you don't need to ask all of these questions, but it's good to have multiple up your sleeve again, so you're prepared for who is in your class, what is arising in your class, and maybe there are some particular ones you want to ask. So how do you feel? How does your heart feel? How does your body feel? How does your mind feel? Really encouraging reflection and giving kids some specifics to start thinking about, oh yeah, how does my heart feel? what is my mind? I never really thought about my body. How does it feel? And we really start to introduce what the heart of this practice is, like being aware of the heart, being aware of the mind, being aware of the body, being aware of the breath. What was your favorite part of class? Which quality of the heart makes you feel happy? Did you notice your heart beating while we were moving? Did your heart beat fast or slow when we were practicing the heart meditation? Maybe because if we did it in the sequence, perhaps after movement in the beginning, it was faster because we just finished moving. But maybe as we settled and really started doing the meditation, we noticed that it slowed down. So what a wonderful demonstration for children. Hey, if I just close my eyes and take a moment, I can slow my heart rate down. I can be the boss of my body. Did any movements make your heart beat fast? Or did others help slow it down? So again, there's that awareness for kids. Oh, I can change how I feel. I can change how I feel with this practice. So these are really important questions. They seem simple and innocuous, and they tie with the theme, but they're really important questions guiding children to reflect. So that's our example lesson plan. So you can see those segments. So now we're going to talk about pacing and transitions. So what are pacing and transitions, and what is the purpose of them? So pacing your class and transitioning from one element to the next just helps to keep it smooth and flowy, so it's not all choppy and segmented. That's not going to engage children, and we're talking about the mind-body connection and how everything works together. So you want your session to flow nice and smooth like that, so it aligns with what you're teaching. So a smooth transition from one element to the next can help to also introduce that mind-body connection. If we're smoothly moving from being aware of the mindfulness and a little bit of breathing and centering to slowly moving our bodies with control, we're supporting the mind-body connection. And if we're doing this in a nice flowy way, again, we're reiterating what we're teaching through movement and through action. Setting the mood and tone for movement meditation and mindfulness sessions. So if it's choppy and segmented and all over the place, then that's just chaotic. And that's not what we want. So again, we're setting that mood and tone and setting the foundation for truly valuable movement meditation and mindfulness sessions. We can maintain engagement. You can lose a kid if you stop and you're like, oh, hang on, what's next? Or I'm looking at my sheet. Okay, let's do this next. We can lose their attention. It flows nicely and they're caught up in the whole adventure and the whole story that you've themed through. You can really hold children's attention. Managing energy levels. And this is where we start to talk about maybe needing to flip it out. So perhaps I walk in and the kids are super sluggish, and it's really hard just to engage them to talk about the introduction and that slow movement, mindful activity in the beginning. So maybe I'll start with a game like Love It or Leave It, and that will perk the kids up, and then we can move into our introduction and our mindfulness. So it doesn't always have to be strictly in the order. You want all those elements in your sequencing, but again, teaching is communicating, and a very important part of teaching is seeing what's in front of you and what's needed, and then meeting that need. So sometimes we do need to flip the elements of our sequencing around a little, so it's paced and transitioned, and we're being aware of the energy levels of our class. And of course, redirecting and maintaining attention too can be important. So we can use pacing and transitions for that, particularly transitions. And I'll give an example of that when we're talking about transitions in a moment. So tips for pacing: being aware of the developmental age of your group and planning accordingly. That's really important. And we are going to there will be a webinar coming up in August for each developmental stage. So we will cover what to expect in terms of the length of class and how, again, to use this basic, fundamental sequencing protocol, but how to apply it for each developmental stage and what you can expect from each developmental stage and what you should put in to encourage appropriate development and enough challenge for kids through each developmental stage. So we're really going to break it down, but being aware of it and planning accordingly is so important to maintain engagement and keep the pace flowing as well. Being prepared to go with the flow and allow the kids to guide you, not a schedule and agenda. So we want all this beautifully well-planned themed class, but just being aware that some children may need more of the games. Some children may need more of the mindfulness activities. Having, again, like I mentioned, multiple ideas to pull from that tie into the theme. You being well prepared, you can quickly flip it around and meet the needs of the children you're working with. Music can be helpful too, and I find this when I teach adults as well. I just have, and it helps me. So if I get too caught up in the moment while we're teaching, I can be aware of, oh my gosh, we've already been doing this for 45 minutes. They have to go to another class. It's time for relaxation. So just having something nice and relaxing and slow paced. And this also just helps again with setting the mood and tone too. It's like while we're doing our mindfulness activity introduction, soft, gentle music, and then maybe when we're doing our movement adventure, it's a little bit more lively and fun and bouncy. And then as it segues into meditation and quiet reflection time, perhaps the music is soft again, or maybe it's playful and fun for the games. So just having a well planned out playlist can help set the tone and mood for the session. It could also help with the pacing too, just by children responding to that sound and also you being aware of, okay, you can keep your pace of your well-planned lesson as well. So transitions support the pace of a session as well. A great example of a transition would be for beach-themed yoga. There's a game I play in beach-themed yoga, a snorkeling trip, where we put a fake snorkel on and take a breath. And we'll do that between each yoga stretch or posture. So that's a nice way to support, to help with centering and grounding children in between postures. So it helps to maintain the energy level. Sometimes kids get super excited when they're exploring these shapes. So to then encourage to take a breath in between can be centering and grounding. Tying it into the theme, they're not getting a boring lecture of, hey, you need to calm down. It's just like you're providing the tools and that self-regulation tool by example. It's like, okay, let's take a snorkel breath and then we'll see what else we find. Another example that comes to mind is dinosaur yoga. If my kids are getting super excited, maybe we'll go back to the dinosaur nest and do a child's pose, come into a dinosaur egg. And then we'll explore our next dinosaur and make our next body shape according to which dinosaur it is. So we can really transition from one posture for the next in the movement section. But it's not just for the movement adventure section. Transitions are how we flow from one part of the class to another nice and smoothly. And an example would be back in the heart lesson plan. I showed you even through the introduction, we began talking about or segued into the mindfulness activity. And then the mindfulness activity, after we shared and talked about the qualities of the heart and shared them, we talked about how can we make more space. And that just nicely transitioned into movement. And we did it all with the theme, tying into the theme. And again, it stops it from being overly segmented or choppy. Helps children to stay engaged, and again, it can just help you with the flow and support the arousal levels or energy levels of the kiddos from a class management perspective as well. So switching it up and letting it go, as I've given some examples. If the pace is spiraling and you're losing your audience, you need to change quick. So that's when you maybe say, okay, let's do a game. If the kids are having a really great time and are super engaged, why rush to the next segment just because it's there? So seeing what's in front of you, seeing what's happening, and going with that is more important than sticking to an agenda. The agenda and the sequencing is important. It's good to have a base. I wouldn't jump to the really deep full body postures before I do a warm-up. So you need to keep that in mind. You need to keep safety in mind. But if it's something, and this comes with experience, so having this foundation of really well-planned classes with multiple activities and these smooth segments with good transitions and pacing, you'll come to understand when and where and how to switch up. But these are just some really good examples. So you can move it around. There's no rule to say you can't start with games and crafts. There's no rule to say you can't jump in and do a little warm-up if you need that warm-up flow to get the energy moving, or to provide an outlet for some energy in kids, and then come into the mindfulness and then go into the adventure. So you can flip it around. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just, again, seeing what the children need without coming in and saying, oh, holding on so tightly to your plan. This is what I planned, so this is what we're doing. It's really about being in the moment and seeing what the kids need in that moment, because it may not be what you thought they needed when you planned your session. So that wraps up for today. Next week, we'll be covering essential elements, equipment, props, and themes. So we'll be learning all about equipment, alternative props you can use, fun props that are engaging for kids, and how to store equipment and props safely, and how to clean them. And we'll also be exploring themes in a lot more detail than we did today. So today was a nice example of the heart themes. Next week, we're really going to get into themes and how they work and how you can make them educational, how you can make them engaging, just different ways to theme for different age groups. So I hope you join me next week. For those who are live today, I'll be sharing this lesson plan in just a moment and be opening it up to Q&A in just a moment. For those who are on demand, I hope you, thank you for joining me. I thank you all for joining me. And I look forward to connecting with you in a future webinar.